Elon Musk has revealed that if he succeeds in buying Twitter, he will reverse the social media giant's decision to ban Donald Trump and reinstate the former president's account. The prospective buyer, who is the world's richest person, warned he believes permanent bans should be extremely rare as he attempts to push through his £35 billion deal.
Banning Trump from Twitter didn't end Trump's voice. It will amplify it among the right. And this is why it is morally wrong and flat out stupid.
Joined now by Bruce Daisley, the former vice president of Twitter. Good idea or bad idea to reinstate President Trump?
I feel like we're sort of in a modern day version of like those Greek fairy stories that we used to hear, that when we used to hear that Zeus or Apollo did incredible things, now we're waiting to see what the billionaires are deciding for us on a daily basis. You know, it's worth reminding ourselves why Trump got banned from Twitter. He got banned because in the midst of that January the 6th insurrection, after repeated warnings and final warnings, he was really deliberately not trying to stop the violence. He was posting things saying he felt that the people invaded in the Capitol were loyal to him. And just effectively, he probably drove, I worked there at the time, he probably drove the leadership of the organization to the point where they had no choice. And so I think most people on January the 7th would have said the ban was justified, and most media accepted that. But I guess we've all got short memories.
But should it be up to billionaires like Elon Musk to decide who we get to hear from?
Exactly my point. Yeah, I think that, you know, in a democratic society, the idea that one man's whim and the change of ownership could change the way that these social platforms impact is obviously, it feels very undemocratic. You know, billionaires' whims controlling media has always been something that we've been subject to, and something we've witnessed in press and in broadcast. But, you know, now it's coming to social platforms. And the danger is it just feels wholly undemocratic. So, you know, broadly, he was banned for repeatedly going against the terms. He was menacing people, threatening people. But ultimately, it shouldn't be one person's decision whether he comes back.
But should social media, I mean, and business be democratic? It's not part of the government, is it? It's not part of that kind of regulatory sphere. It is something that's an independent business. Why does it have to be democratic?
There you go. Let's leave that as your final note. But
no, I'm asking you what you think.
But, you know, I think in a democratic society, the opportunity to have oversight over these incredibly powerful tools is probably something of a right. You know, one of the challenges is that we're allowing and almost deferring the control of what we read and see. We're allowing that to sit broadly to the winner of who's got the biggest pile of cash money, pile of cash. So, look, you know, I think most people would have said when Donald Trump got suspended that he'd reached a point where he deserved that. I recognise that probably, you know, that is a subjective decision, but it's a shame that it will fall to one person to change that when probably collectively there was agreement on it before.
How then could you make social media more democratic? How could it be more accountable, given that, of course, by its very nature, it's something which is truly global? It isn't limited to one country, which I imagine would make it more straightforward to keep it within one set of rules.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in first instance, more accountability. So quite often technology companies shroud themselves in secrecy, you know, almost like Colonel Sanders' original recipe. They try and say that their algorithm is complicated and sophisticated. And so the consequence of that, they avoid too much scrutiny. But my exposure, I worked for 8 years at Twitter. My exposure is that if people knew the amount of employees working on responding to issues, or if people knew the amount of people working to keep toxic tweets away from them, if they knew how small those teams were, then they would have an opinion on it. And my view is that every platform, from Facebook to YouTube to Twitter, should have to publish the amount of people they've got working, responding to customer inquiries, responding to if someone is receiving abuse, they should know that the team responding to that is only 3 people. I think if we knew those things and if our politicians were able to know those things, it would fundamentally change the dialogue, the discourse that takes place. If we knew the rules and the rules were published, then we could say, okay, we don't believe those rules are strict enough. So we often see these things only when they intrude into the news. A Premiership football is subjected to racist abuse. And the first thing we say is, how did this happen? Well, if we knew that it happened because there was a small team, the size of the Uber passengers in a car, and they're dealing with it in Hungary, if we knew that all of those things were the components, then we'd say, well, now it's obvious that that was going to happen. And I think if there was that degree more transparency, it would actually improve our ability to police these things and hold these platforms accountable.
You do make it all sound a little bit sinister. Now, on reflection, looking back as somebody who's worked within it, do you think it slightly is?
No, I mean, I'm a big fan of how these platforms can work, but broadly, you have to understand that the business model of Silicon Valley it's very convenient for Silicon Valley platforms to say, look, we're going to allow free speech. We're going to allow these things to be unfiltered because they're incredibly cheap. It's like opening a swimming pool and saying we're not going to have lifeguards. It's much cheaper to do it that way. And it's in the interest of the venture capitalists who often are funding these businesses when they start up to put in that very reduced basic model. But when it comes down to a platform that's reaching 10, 15, 20 million people, I think we have a right to say, okay, I understand that there was an entrepreneurial stage where you were getting going, but now we expect a degree of accountability. We expect a degree that you're going to operate within norms. And I think we've too often been cowed by the appeal of innovation and entrepreneurs. And we've not necessarily...
We're going to have to stop because we're about to hit the break, but thank you very much. Bruce Daisley, former VP of Twitter.